Pushkin. Welcome back to Risky Business, a show about making better decisions. I'm Maria Konnikova.
And I'm Nate Silver.
So today on the show, Nate, we'll be talking about kind of core risky business topic, which is, poker, sports betting, gambling, all of these things. We'll be talking about the 2 indictments that came out last week on Thursday, the 23rd, that involve NBA players, other personalities who allegedly took part in some unsavory cheating behaviors.
It's a little bit like 2 federal indictments, 5 mafia families, 8 co-conspirators, and a partridge. It's almost
no. Please continue, Nate.
No,
and Nate, you have some very Christmassy lights behind you because you are not in New York.
I am in FBI. No, I'm just kidding. I am in Ciudad de Mexico. I'm in Mexico City. I'm not supposed to be in Mexico City right now. I am supposed to have flown home tonight. But, there was some at least good risky business airline strategy employed last night, which is why I'm getting out today and instead of staying even longer. I didn't bring my microphone, right? That's why I have my phone dangling from my headphones. I'm at the El Camino Real Hotel near Terminal 1 of whatever it's called, Benito Juarez Airport. Although I did make a good decision yesterday, Maria, talking about decisions under pressure. So getting the flight, a little slow on the tarmac after actually, I don't think we've even pushed off the tarmac, right? And the pilot is like, well, we're just taking care of some just paperwork right here, right? I'm like, I feel like I'm already being gaslit a little bit. It's like it's gonna be another 40 minutes or so on the paperwork, and then he comes back on. And by the way, I can tell
40 minutes on the paperwork, Nate. That's never. Taking care of some paperwork is not 40 minutes.
I'm an experienced flyer. I can tell within microseconds by the tone of the pilot's voice just how bad the news is, right? So it's another delay for so we're now an hour and 30, 40 minutes without having pushed back from the gate. Now there's some clarity that's an engine problem with an undetermined time of resolution, right? I start using what little Wi-Fi I have to ask. Not that you can address it with your own common sense about being a frequent flyer, right? But I asked ChatGPT and Claude, what are the chances that we're really going to get off on this flight tonight, right? Mm-hmm. And Claude's like, yo, they're gaslighting you, bro.
Claude tells it like it is.
They're gaslighting you, bro. You're not going to get off tonight. What are you talking about? 30% chance, right? And then we deplane, and then Claude's like, immediately, right now, rebook your ticket. And so we did. And so we got, I think, one of the relatively few seats available on the same flight today. Probably going to be a middle seat. Not going to lie, Maria. Probably going to be middle seat, but I'd rather have a middle seat for Houston or something. But the important thing is you have to act quickly in these air travel decision nightmares. After my partner and I checked in, we went back out to the lobby to go get an Uber to dinner, and there's a line an hour and a half long of everybody else from our flight who did not behave so proactively, who were gaslit by Delta, but Delta Airlines, you owe me one, you owe me a free flight somewhere probably. So act decisively. Sometimes the equilibrium of let's kind of wait and see is actually quite a bad equilibrium.
Yes, absolutely. That's really good advice. I am going to echo that. Act quickly, and when shit seems like it's going wrong, it'll probably go wrong. But now let's turn to the hot topic of the day, which is so in the risky business domain. It's not even funny. Core risky business. Nate, has anything been happening with the NBA and sports betting and poker? I don't think there's anything in the news. Do you?
It's been an exciting start to the NBA season. Victor Wembanyama looks like an MVP already. Steph Curry has already had big comebacks. I'm a big NBA fan. But which day was it? It was Thursday, I think, early morning. Yeah. Is that right?
Yep. So it was Thursday, the 23rd of October.
So there are 2 federal indictments, which at first might appear unrelated, but actually have a lot of co-conspirators, as they are called. And remember, the things we're going to be discussing here are allegations. Maria and I are not lawyers. We have a right as journalists and citizens to engage in Bayesian priors about how likely some of these things are. But they are accusations, allegations. They are not proven, yet they are disputed by their clients' lawyers in at least some cases. But two big federal indictments, one of which concerns cheating, essentially, at sports betting. There are a couple of different forms of this. So one form involves one particular NBA player named Terry Rozier, who is kind of a 40th percentile mediocre NBA player, but has still made over $100 million in his career, allegedly removing himself from games early to help his co-conspirators win prop bets. Now, look, our audience probably will know more about prop bets than the average bear. But if you're not familiar, if you think about sports betting, you might think about, okay, I can bet on point spreads, I can bet on money lines, which is just the percentage chance that a team wins, or totals or over-unders, as they're sometimes called, right? And you can bet on futures, who's going to win the Super Bowl, that kind of thing. However, recently you can also bet on how individual players will do, and it almost doesn't seem to matter how obscure the player is. So Terry Rozier is a mediocre player. Jonte Porter is a player who is less than mediocre and was suspended for life by the NBA last year for a, I guess, proven to the NBA's satisfaction allegation of like a similar scheme, right? You're like, hey, look, bet the underbros on this. I'm going to ask out of the game after the first quarter, right? Cite some injury, and then you'll cash in big on your underbets, right? It's like allegation 1A. Allegation 1B concerns inside information leaking to the gamblers about the availability of key NBA players. So a person named co-conspirator 8, who is almost certainly, because the clues are not very subtle, currently suspended Portland Trailblazers coach Chauncey Billups, a former member of the Detroit Pistons, other teams, who has now been suspended by the league, but a Hall of Fame player who allegedly tipped off his gambling buddies about when key personnel were going to participate. Damian Jones is a Los Angeles Lakers former player. Actually, Damian Jones is like a confidant of LeBron James. LeBron James is not accused of anything whatsoever, but like he was a friend who had access to like, is LeBron practicing? How's he feeling? Knowing whether LeBron James will play in a game, obviously very important if you're trying to bet on the Lakers or against the Lakers for that matter, right? And there are several allegations of inside information leaking before it became publicly known, according to the NBA's officially very diligent injury reporting protocols, right? And by the way, this mostly happened in the 2022-2023 NBA season, which is a year where I bet the regular season every day. It was kind of an experiment, side hustle for the book to see what the ins and outs like really were for a professional gambler. And so some of this stuff looked fishy in real time. The second indictment is for illegal
Operation Royal Flush.
Operation. I mean, can you try a little harder, right? Can you try like, I don't know, Operation Full House, or I don't know.
Operation Royal Flush, Nate. Yeah, this one is poker related, about cheating in games from LA, Vegas, New York, even the Hamptons. I realize that's also New York, but games all over the country. And there's one person who's in both indictments, we assume, because as you said, person of interest, 8 in indictment number 1 is probably Chauncey Billups. Chauncey Billups is named in indictment number 2. And these were illegal underground games where lots of famous faces, they're known as the face cards in the indictment, Nate. A lot of famous players and famous personalities were in games. Some of them were apparently involved in this, allegedly involved in this. The games were crooked. There were crooked card shufflers. There were x-ray tables. There were sunglasses and contact lenses. And basically, I don't even understand. Like, it's like layer upon layer upon layer. If the technology of cheating exists, it seems like they used it at one point or another in these games. And the most striking thing, Nate, about all of these things is it's the first time I've seen, the famous New York crime families working together. It's the 5 families is what you traditionally think of. In this particular case, 4 of them are in the indictment. But in my mind, it's the 5 families uniting for a worthy cause, which is there are so many suckers here. Let's see how we can fleece them, because allegedly they were all involved in these games, in backing them, in helping them take place, and in helping to collect outstanding debt when people lost over $7 million. I mean, that's for poker. Like, I understand that for a basketball player who makes hundreds of millions, 7 million might not seem like a lot, but for a poker game, $7.1 million, that's a lot of money.
What I've never done is play in a underground game as opposed to a home game. To me, the big distinction is not as complicated as people are making it out to be, is are they taking a rake
Exactly.
or a profit, right? If they are,
Yeah, and by the way, let's just caveat this for 1 second. People who aren't our poker listeners, rake means that out of every pot played, so say Nate and I are in a hand together, Nate bets $10 and I call the $10, so there's $20 in the middle, and the house will take, depending on the rake, let's say $1 out of it or $2 out of it, whatever it is, and that will go towards the house. That's the rake. You take a cut out of every pot that's in the middle, just automatically as like a fee, a courtesy fee for running the game, and that is not legal. So even though home games are legal almost everywhere, if you don't take rake, as soon as you rake them, it becomes completely illegal.
Yeah, and we should clarify a couple of things here, right? All of the home games I play in include some collection for booze, catering, if you bring in an external dealer. So if there are shared expenses, I mean, if somebody is the host, nothing says they have to eat all the expenses themselves, right?
Right.
But they're not trying to directly profit from the game. Maybe they're trying to build a network. Maybe they think they're a winning player in the game, but they don't make money per hand or per hour just by the mere act of running a poker game, right? So that's one clear distinction. By the way, if you want to be technical, check the laws in your local state. As far as I am aware, where have I ever played private games? I guess New York, California, those states, poker is pretty clearly legal, I believe. If you're not taking a rake, you always got to be careful. The feds don't always interpret gambling law that sympathetically. If there's a lot of money changing hands, if there's a bunch of drug use or prostitution or things like that at your game, then, but typically poker gets kind of caught up. If I had to guess, well, I don't know. If I had to guess, I would think that the NBA investigation came first and the poker kind of got dragged into it. Maybe that's wrong. But in terms of kind of what things the feds typically prioritize more, maybe it's wrong. The poker was actually more money, allegedly, right? And a total of more than 7 million, at least, quote unquote, they say.
But I would actually think that, from my perspective, it seems like the poker would probably not have happened without the sports betting, because in the sports betting, there are just many more parties that are directly related to state institutions, right? Because now that sports betting is legal in over 30 states, states are actually reliant on tax revenue from sports betting, from the big companies, from all of that legal stuff. So there's a lot of, now it's been formalized in such a way that it just draws a lot of attention. It's not just an internal NBA thing, right? Where the NBA can say oh, I've investigated my player and everything seems to be okay or not. But now you have all of these different organizations with different incentives, because I think that on its own, the NBA isn't necessarily incentivized to go after everyone so ardently, but together, once you have the sports betting companies, once you have state involvement, once you have all of these things, then that's where shit hits the fan.
And we'll be right back after this break. I am not as sympathetic to the people who are defrauded. Let's say, it's not a victimless crime, right? The victims entered into this den of iniquity, kind of literally.
Which one? We're talking about poker now.
For poker, right? Where they're playing in games that, if you're playing at high stakes, you ought to know that there are various kinds of risks, right? I mean, it's just people don't realize the extent to which everything that a casino does, right? From what they do when you cash your cash in for chips to burning a card before dealing the flop, right? Even things people don't think about, why is a 2-color deck black and red instead of 4 colors, which they'll use in recreational games sometimes? Well, it's because it's hard to distinguish if you only see two colors and black and red kind of both appear kind of dark, or kind of dark hued colors, right? If a dealer mistakenly or unmistakenly flashes a card, you can see the bottom of the deck, right? That gives you less information if you don't know as much about the suit, right? And so like all these procedures that have been put into place for many years have made poker in casino environments relatively safe enterprises, which is not the equilibrium otherwise, right? The equilibrium otherwise is that, it's someone cheats. Whereas for the NBA scandal, it's not just that like the betting companies are defrauded and the league is defrauded. It also affects the interests of fans and affects the interests of like the competitive integrity of the NBA. It also affects like people like me who are trying to win money the right way. At sports betting, right? You can try to read the tea leaves of what kind of like I don't know if you call the line rigged, but you can often detect the presence of, frankly, of inside information in the line, right? It's hard to know when it's inside information versus like when is there sharp movement from a particularly skilled gambler or from a syndicate, right? Billy Walters, the famous NFL, another sports bettor, right? He plays a lot of action, tends to come in late in the day. That's his philosophy, right? And if the bookmakers know which way he's betting, that might move the spread materially, right? But like you very often, if you're betting the NBA, have a sense that somebody knows something that I don't.
Yeah, it's really interesting in both of these things. I think something that came to my mind as someone who has spent a lot of time with con artists, right? And in that world, in both, sports betting and in poker games, there's this real blind spot when it comes to yourself for most people, and being objective about kind of your own edge and like what is right versus not, in the sense that like if the cliche is cliche for a reason. If it seems too good to be true, right, it probably is. And yet, right, when it comes to you, you think that, oh, it's not actually too good to be true. I've just found a really great spot. I found a really great edge, et cetera, et cetera. And with sports betting, Nate, it's that. So unlike poker, which I do play, I've never bet on sports.
Never even once?
No, not even once. I've never placed a single sports bet.
Oh my God.
I promised Eric Seidel when I first started playing poker, and when he agreed to coach me and kind of mentor me, he made me promise that I wouldn't sports bet. So I have kept that promise. And yeah, he firmly believed that sports betting was the way to ruin for a lot of people. Not that I'd become a gambling addict, but that he has hardly ever met anyone who has a true edge, right? So unless you have information, and he, by the way, bets on sports himself, but it's very hard to have an edge. So no, so I haven't personally ever bet on sports. However, what you were just talking about, I think that there's a lot of like, oh, like, is this line right? Like you're trying to figure out, is this too good to be true or not? And as you wrote in the Silver Bulletin earlier this week, like, there were times when you took something and it ended up that it was too good to be true, right? That like it just looked so good and you were like, I'm going to bet it anyway. And it was too good to be true. And so you are like, when you are fucking with the integrity of it, like you actually are affecting a lot of people in very real ways. And that's a huge problem. It's a problem for poker, obviously, but sports are kind of America's national pastime, and you have to believe that you're watching fair competitions, right? That players are trying their best, that everything like that they want to win, like that they're playing their best game, that they're trying to kind of do whatever it takes. And if that faith is, fractured, right? If all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, that's not what's happening. I'm watching something that's rigged, but it's not supposed to be rigged. Then that's heartbreaking in some ways, right? It kind of shatters, it shatters a dream, I think, in a lot of ways.
Let me hit on both the points you raised. Let me first talk about like both poker players and sports bettors are often naive about how thin their edges are, right?
Yes.
Now, live cash poker against fish are bad players. You can have objectively pretty large edges.
Yes.
There, right? So, sometime, it might be rational in some sense to say like, okay, there's a little few risks here, but this game is so good, right? But yeah, no, I mean, like, a lot of these things are, I don't know if you're as much of an NBA geek as I am, probably not. a lot of these things are things that like are already problems with the league anyway. So the fact that like teams will try to lose, they will tank in order to get a better draft pick occasionally for other reasons, to manipulate their playoff spot to get a more favorable matchup, right? From what I understand, the league has not been very diligent about like the cause for why somebody isn't playing. Also, you might strongly suspect. I mean, again, when I was betting the NBA, you usually get a pretty good idea about like certain guys aren't going to play in certain games if there are back-to-backs or a bunch of games in a row. Teams tend to like obfuscate that into the last minute for like a competitive edge, right? And the league has, depends who you talk to, not enforced that as rigorously as they could. No other sports league like the NBA, again, maybe my favorite sports league, has this problem with teams tanking games and trying to lose.
So as listeners of the show know, I'm working on a book about cheating in games, which is very germane here. The other sport where you see like so much cheating taking place, but it's a very different level, is tennis, right? Because that's somewhere, once again, where it's individual, and individuals, like, you can easily affect the outcome because it's not a team sport, right? From what I can tell, basketball is the other one, just because of the way that the sport works. And so I think that a lot of organizations, including the NBA, Nate, if we put this back in kind of a game theoretic lens, they often are not thinking kind of long term, right? They're not thinking about incentives for like long term health. They're thinking immediately like, oh shit, I need to cover my ass, right? Like, it's better for me if I don't look too closely. It's better for me if I clear this player. It's better, people think everything's fine. And yet, over the long term, if you don't pay attention to these sorts of things, that's when trust in the integrity of the game is going to flounder. And that's what actually matters. And so I think that, this is true, this is true in poker and, punishing cheaters, but people are very short-sighted and they think, oh, immediately bad. Like, I don't want the bad press. And yet, if you actually pay attention, if you actually punish, if the punishments are harsh, that's how you disincentivize the behavior and create a game that people believe in moving forward. And so, I would love, obviously, these indictments right now, allegations, we don't know what's going to happen, but I would really love for there to be, if there's the evidence, very harsh punishments, right? Punishments that would deter anyone from towing even close to the line for whatever reason, because that's what, I'm starting to get into basketball, Nate, because of you. I'm only starting to see how fun this game is, and I don't want to get into it just to be disappointed because I think that players are trying to, tank games or something like that. And so I think that it's just so incredibly short-sighted to be lenient or to say, oh, it's okay, and harsh is better. You want the fear of repercussions to be real. And I think in the past that hasn't been the case.
I think the NBA, I mean, it's a little bit Trumpian in the sense that like, hey, look, deny it, and then when people aren't paying attention on a Friday, put out some press release that it's been solved or suspend somebody. And like, if you're ever in like a PR situation or a PR crisis of any kind, like, people have short memories. The news cycle is busy. There's lots of exciting things that are happening at any given time in the NBA or in the world, right? But it kind of has like a cumulative effect, right?
We'll be back right after this.
You mentioned tennis. The reason why basketball is vulnerable, number one, these bookmakers are turning a team sport into an individual sport. So
Yep.
It's not just the fact that Jalen Brunson, the New York Knicks point guard, one of my favorite players, has spoken about how like people will be chirping at him from the sidelines, but like, Jalen, you're supposed to score 22 points and you have 21, what the fuck's going on, right? And that kind of thing, get like death threats and nasty messages. And so like, one of the protections in a team sport is that if one conspirator or a couple are cheating, it certainly shifts the odds enough that you have a very profitable bet. But like, famously, sometimes these things don't work, right? There was a Boston college cheating scandal, which did involve the mafia in the 1970s, but like, only like 1.5 players were doing it. And they like, I think the mafia didn't actually win the majority of its bets, right? So the fact that you're kind of turning a team sport into an individual sport with prop bets is problematic too. But I want to go at why do you think Terry Rozier made 115, more than that, made over $100 million in his career, right?
Yeah.
Chauncey Billups, probably similar. Current head coach, I'm sure he gets paid pretty well, so he can do speaking gigs and advertisements, whatever else. Why do you think, Maria, people like that are participating in these schemes? They're certainly not, well, you wouldn't think they were desperate for income. You never know when somebody has a gambling problem or another type of problem.
Sure.
But why do you think they're doing this?
I mean, I think it depends on the exact situation, but I think oftentimes it's not for the money, right? So for someone like Terry, maybe it's to feel important and feel like he has influence and like be a cool dude for his friends, right? Because a lot of his stuff, when I was reading the indictments, it was giving tips to like childhood friends or, homeboys and trying to help them out, which is why it wasn't huge amounts of money, right? This is why we're not talking millions or it was smaller bets. And I think that that kind of image creation, like I'm the chill dude who can be cool. I think that that's actually a huge incentive for people. And I don't know much about his career or anything like that, but it seems, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that it's not like he's a top tier player who is always, who people are talking about and are like, yeah, look at him go. So it's a way of, kind of propping up your ego in those situations. Now, a lot of people who were top tier players, and by the way, this is not just sports. This is true of poker. This is true of a lot of things. If they feel like either they're losing their edge or like they're about to, or they're not quite sure, cheating is a way to make certain that you at least make some money, right? To make certain you win, to kind of solidify that, like, oh, I will
or
sure.
feel like everybody else is doing it, right? You feel like everybody else is doing it, and I have to do, the number of...
So that's, absolutely. That's kind of the Lance Armstrong, right? Like, so why is someone like Lance Armstrong cheating?
Barry Bonds in baseball was one of the best players in the league before steroids, and he's like, well, fuck these, fuck these guys, like Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa are doing this shit.
For
and
sure.
I can
Yeah, for sure. And then some people just get off on it, like, to be perfectly honest. Like, some people like the idea that, like, I'm pulling one over on people, like, I'm in charge. Maybe someone like Terry, like, feels slight, or even Chauncey, feels slighted by the league. Like, they didn't appreciate me enough. Like, they didn't value me enough. Like, they didn't pay me quite enough for whatever. They did this bad thing to me. I don't like what they do with X or Y. So a lot of times, there's a lot of work on this. When people can find an excuse in their head, why they're not adequately valued, why they're being overlooked, something like that, then they want to say, fuck you to whoever is doing that, whether it's the league, whether it's the company they work for. So a lot of people justify, stealing, everything from like taking office supplies home to actually, stealing. Once you get that rationalization in your head, like some people will just easily cross that line. And then, so it's like kind of sticking it to the man in certain ways. And you also think like you rationalize it away to say that it is kind of a victimless crime. Like I'm helping out like myself and I'm helping out my boys or whatever it is. And like, they're a big corporation, they can take it. Or in the case of poker, like, come on, like they get the honor of playing with me. They get this celebrity status by being in this game. And I'm giving them something back, so I'll take their money. They're paying for the experience, right? You get all of these rationalizations in your head that make you do it. And I think that people, when they say, oh, but like, they're not stupid, like they wouldn't risk it all for this. Actually, yes, they would, because they don't think they would be caught, right? Like, all of these things went on for over a year. It sounds like multiple years. And the more you can get away with it, right? If you're not caught the first time, if you're not caught the second time, you start thinking that you're invincible and you start getting this thing like, I won't be caught. Like everything is fine. And I can keep doing this. So you actually think your risk is much lower than it is. And even if I'm caught, there's going to be a slap on the wrist. They'll say they investigated me and it was fine. They didn't find anything suspicious, like my leg really was injured or whatever it is. So the repercussions are not really going to be serious enough and I'll continue doing what I'm doing. So I think all of these things are just layered one on top of the other and are at play in both of these situations, both of these indictments.
But yeah, look, one One way you can defend the big DraftKings, FanDuel, Caesars, MGMs of the world, right, is by saying that like they are much better equipped to detect this and then either incentivize or required to report it when they do find suspicious activity, right? I mean, so first of all, they are not doing bookmaking in the traditional robust way because you have these sharp bookmakers and you have bookmakers, I'll mention DraftKings, which is a bookmaker that's regarded as being, at least when I was betting the NBA a couple years ago, not all that sharp, right? They're a retail sports book, and their business model is customer discrimination and differentiation, where if you're a VIP at a place like DraftKings, I had a friend who literally would get cases of his favorite Cabernet mailed to his house and front row seats for New York Rangers games and things like that, right? And, at some level of access, you get private jets to the Super Bowl or whatever, right? And they can bet infinity dollars, basically, whereas I am limited by most of the sports books, and I'm not that good. I mean, I've won a little bit of money at sports betting, right? But I'm not a pro. I'm just trying to be good. Nobody should be taking $100,000 worth of action on Terry Rozier under rebounds or whatever, right? The only reason someone would bet that is because they have inside knowledge, or maybe if they have a very particular model, right? But you don't want some super sharp MIT kid with a model to exploit this obscure part of your menu, right? And you don't want people with inside information betting, but they figure that, okay, well, we know who our good and bad customers are, and we don't want to fuck with our VIPs, as they're so called, right? They can do what they want, and every now and then they might get a tip. So they're not, it's not a robust form of bookmaking, right? It's a form of bookmaking that relies on customer identification. And that's part of why I'm less sympathetic. And because when the gambling companies, in general, when you pass legislation, then you kind of pass the skeleton of the legislation, and then the lobbyists and the industry interests do their work to interpret that legislation in ways that is shockingly favorable to those vested interests, right? You do have some states, Massachusetts now, and New York has looked into okay, should you really be able to let some people bet literally $10 on a game and bet $1 million on the same game? Probably not, right? But if you're drafting regulations, I think the average sports bettor doesn't realize that if they think you're good, they will limit you. If they think you're good, they will not take meaningful amounts of money from you in terms of action, right? By the way, when you look at the ads for sports betting, if you go back to the ads for daily fantasy sports, they were marketed as a game of skill, right? Daily fantasy sports is where you draft a team, and you draft a team of real players, but you compete against other people, and the house takes a cut or a rake, like poker or something, right? They have no interest in particular in who wins that outcome. And they'd say, it's a game of skill. The ads would literally say, you are Joe Schmo sitting in your office drone job, right? Go to DraftKings or FanDuel, right? You can win millions and sleep with supermodels. It was not that subtle because you're smart and they're dumb. It was very unsubtle, appealing to the male ego. And now they don't do that, right? They don't want to advertise it as a game of skill, because if they think they're skilled, then they won't let you bet very much, right? And so that's, that whole thing is kind of bullshit. It's not a unique innovation, I guess, of American sports betting lines, but British companies were notorious for doing this too, but still, it's moved a long way from the traditional form of bookmaking. And the other thing too, people don't realize is sports betting was for many years in Vegas what was called an amenity, AMEINITY, right? You're in the middle of the desert, so you have lots of physical space. Sometimes people want to be in a casino and actually, so if you're in a casino and you want to lose not that much money, right? Actually, one of the better things to do might be to bet $1,000 on an NFL game. If you're betting naively, that that bet has a negative expected value of $46, right? Typical point spread hold margins, right? For $46, you can have 3.5 hours of entertainment watching the game in the sports book and getting free drinks and sweating with your friends or whatever, right? It's actually not that bad, but it was kind of seen as an amenity, right? And there's kind of this mystique of some guys can beat the Lions, right? And but it's moved away from that model. And by the way, but it was 1% of revenues was from the sports book, right? It was a almost a lost leader. And the notion that you can have this market where sports betting is huge and yet you limit sharp bettors is I don't know, it's kind of at best unproven, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that one of the things that these indictments have shown us is that, we need a more centralized, rigorous approach to how do we regulate this, right? What kinds of sports bets for which amounts? Like, can we standardize something that actually upholds the integrity of the games, that will avoid situations that, turn team sports into individual sports, that kind of change those incentive structures around. It's a tough ask, right? Because as you say, Nate, like there are, various forces pulling you in various directions. But I think it's doable, and I think that it's something that people need to sit down and think about. But it's not like an easy Band-Aid fix, like, oh, we need to just like limit all bets to X or do thing Y. I think it does require a nuanced understanding of sports betting, which frankly, I don't think a lot of legislators have, right? Like,
No, I wouldn't think so either. And frankly, the media doesn't either. I mean, the media tends
yeah,
to default toward like scoldiness about this. And like,
exactly.
if you don't have
Exactly.
these legal sites, a lot of it goes underground, not 100%. I mean, the
Yeah,
fiction's one
absolutely.
thing, right? I'm actually betting the NFL this year. Believe me, Maria, I know how, and I have at some points in the past, like, made bets in the gray market using crypto and things like that. I know how to do that. It's just not worth the trouble, right?
Yep.
Whereas if it's DraftKings or FanDuel, right? I mean, literally even like the year I was betting the NBA, I was like staying at the Win. I guess it was for the Win December poker tournament, right? And there's like, here's an NBA bet. I'm going to bet $1,100, and it has an expected value of like 1%, probably, right? So the expected value is like $12, right? Do I want to go down to the fucking sportsbook window and like place this bet, right? And feel like a degen? No, it's only worth $12. I'll stay in my room and yeah. So there's like shit like that where like even that friction of like the ease of online betting. So yeah, there are a few categories. One has to do with like you have to limit the menu of bets, right? If you want to bet on what
Yeah.
LeBron James or Nikola Jokic is going to do, fine, right? But like
Yeah,
not
that
Terry
seems like low
Rozier.
hanging fruit. I think that that's low hanging fruit. That's something that could immediately be done, right? Yes, the menus should be limited.
Number two, I think you need some constraints on this limiting or price discrimination, right? I'd go radically, but I guess I'm self-interested. I'd go radically and say everybody gets the same price, right? You post some limits. If you want to say, okay, we can have a spread of 2x or 4x or 5x or something, okay, that's fine, right? But like it lets you put irresponsible lines up that are subject to cheating or manipulation, right? If you only take bets from people who you think are going to lose on them, right? It's like one of these carnival games where it looks easy to like throw the ball at the
Yep.
bullseye and get the free stuffed animal, but like it's actually pretty difficult. And number three is probably like you know creating more friction. If you had a 24-hour waiting period between you deposit money and when you bet, right, that would create meaningful friction.
Yeah.
If you required, you say, okay, in the UK, don't know if this is still true. I guess it must still be true, right? You go and there's like a Ladbrokes shop, right? You get your chippy and then you go to the betting window and whatever, right? Say, okay, you want to bet, you just have to go to a physical location, and that adds some additional protection. You can have know your customer laws. If somebody seems like they're drunk or out of line or abusive, right, you can deny their action, that kind of thing, right? And so,
Yep.
like, say, yeah, you want to bet? Okay, and there's going to be a little DraftKings office, maybe 8
Yep.
of them throughout New York, and maybe there's a
Yep.
nice little bar there if you want to watch your games, right? But you have to physically be in a location to bet. I wouldn't go
Yep.
that far. I wouldn't advocate for all of this, but public opinion's turning against this, right? People
Yeah.
are, for both good and bad reasons, people are prudish, but like uh, the industry, I think, has been short-sighted. It was a
Yeah.
power grab or a money grab, right? And now they're paying the price for that.
Yeah. So I think that our three major recommendations, because I do agree with the framework, is one, limiting menu of bets. So basically, actually taking a look at what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what's kind of in the spirit of the game versus not. Two, transparency and standardization, and three, adding some friction in for the ability to place bets so that people aren't kind of in this spiral where like they get into situations that they can't then get out of. I think that those are kind of three buckets that are probably really good places to start so that sports betting can regain its good reputation because
I don't know if it ever had a good reputation, but like...
right, but can get public sentiment more on its side. I think that would be helpful, and I think that if those types of improvements come out of this scandal, that will be something. On that note, Nate, I wish you the best of luck getting out of Mexico.
I wish I could have DraftKings on the runway. If I would have fucking gotten like plus 300, your flight will not take off tonight, right? I mean, that was, yeah.
That would be great. That would be great. You had some inside information.
We would not be staying at the El Camino Real. I'll tell you that much, Maria.
Well, I hope that this is your last night at El Camino Real, or that last night was your last night, and that tonight you will safely be in your New York City apartment. Let us know what you think of the show. Reach out to us at riskybusiness@pushkin.fm. Risky Business is hosted by me, Maria Konnikova.
And by me, Nate Silver. The show is a co-production of Pushkin Industries and iHeartMedia. This episode was produced by Isaac Carter. Our associate producer is Sonia Gerwitt. Lydia, Jean Cott, and Daphne Chen are our editors. And our executive producer is Jacob Goldstein. Mixing by Sarah Bruguer.
If you like the show, please rate and review us so other people can find us too. But once again, only if you like us. We don't want those bad reviews out there. Thanks for tuning in.